Magic Treehouse. Late Lunch with Llamas. Written by Mary Pope Osborne. Chapter 5. Go Slow Fast. A black and green snake was sliding out from the underbrush. Then Jack saw another. "Pit vipers!" he yelled, springing up from the ground. "Venomous!" The two pit vipers slithered away between the rocks. "Go, go!" Jack shouted to Annie. "Go slow!" she yelled, hurrying after him. "Go slow fast!" cried Jack. They scrambled up the mountain slope. The snake's scare gave them a burst of energy. But after a while they grew tired and short of breath again. I need to stop," said Annie, panting. "Up ahead, short way," Jack gasped. "A clearing. Keep going." Jack and Annie pushed themselves harder, climbing through brush and tall plants, until they came to an open area. "Stop here." Jack could barely get the words out. Just below the misty mountaintop, the forest had been cleared. A series of low stone walls had been built on the slope. Between the walls were narrow, flat fields. "What are these walls?" said Annie, still breathless. "I think they're called terraces," said Jack. "The walls keep rocks and mud from sliding down mountains." "Looks like a stairway for giants," said Annie. "I'll bet it leads to the secret city." "Yeah," said Jack. "Let's rest again, figure stuff out. But first, check for snakes." They both looked around carefully for snakes. "All clear," said Annie. She and Jack sank to the ground. They rested their backs against the first stone wall and took deep breaths. Jack felt sleepy and lightheaded. "Let's read about Old Mountain," he said. He pulled out their travel guide and looked in the index. "Here," he read. "In the language of the Incas, Machu Picchu means Old Mountain." "What? Machu Picchu?" said Jack, suddenly awake. "That's where Uncle Josh went," said Annie. "I saw his photos. He took a train up the mountain." "I know," said Jack. "Lots of tourists go to Machu Picchu. It's one of the wonders of the world, like the Great Wall of China." Jack turned the page. A photo showed crumbling stone ruins on a mountain ridge. The roofs of the buildings were gone. He read, "The fortress of Machu Picchu was built almost 600 years ago, at the height of the Inca Empire. It was a secret retreat for royal families and their guards and servants. Machu Picchu was active for only about 100 years. After the Inca Empire ended, the secret city fell into ruin and was forgotten until explorers discovered it in the early 20th century. "Whoa," said Jack. "Topa and his grandparents are still calling Machu Picchu the secret city. So we've definitely come here hundreds of years in the past." "I know," said Annie. "Come on, we have to keep going." "Wait, we should rest longer to get used to the low oxygen," said Jack. They took deep breaths and tried to relax. Finally, Annie stood up. "I think I'm ready now," she said. "Me too," said Jack. He felt a lot better. "Let's give it a try." He put away the travel guide, then turned to Annie. She gave him a thumbs up. Then she pointed toward the secret city. "I see a path," said Annie. She led the way to a pebble path that ran between the terraces up the slope. "Not too fast," said Jack. They slowly hiked up the path. Clouds hid the higher terraces. Through the haze, they saw people working in the narrow terrace fields. The workers were using wooden shovels to break up the hard ground. Jack was glad the workers wore ponchos and hats like theirs. He was also glad it was hard to see through the cloud mist. Hopefully no one would notice two kids heading toward the secret city. "Keep going," Jack said. "Keep breathing." They kept following the path. Near the top of the mountain, they came to the last terrace. A high wall loomed beyond it. Jack was panting and covered with sweat. He and Annie pulled off their wool hats and gasped for air. "I'm so thirsty," said Annie. "Me too," Jack said. His throat felt dry and rough. "Keep going." They climbed onto a large boulder and looked over the wall. "Oh, man," breathed Jack. All the mist had cleared away from the high mountain ridge. In the dazzling sunlight stood the fortress of Machu Picchu. Chapter 6. The Secret City. Rows and rows of buildings gleamed in the bright sunlight. The buildings were made of carved white stone. They had yellow thatched rooftops. In the center of Machu Picchu was a grass-covered plaza. It was built on different levels. People were strolling up and down in colorful tunics and hats. Some wore red ponchos and long dresses. Most wore feathers and gold jewelry. "We're the only people from our time ever to visit the living world of Machu Picchu," said Annie. "Right," breathed Jack. "But don't forget, this place is a secret. We're not supposed to be here." I know, said Annie. "We have to find Kriya fast. Do you see a baby llama anywhere?" "No, they're probably not here yet," said Jack. "Topa said the way we came through the forest was faster than the old trail. Let's look at a map." He pulled out their travel guide and found a map of Machu Picchu. "Here," he said. Annie pointed to places labeled on the map. Royal Palace, Temple of the Moon, Temple of the Condor. "Condor?" said Jack. "That's interesting." "Right," said Annie. She looked back at the map. "Okay, here's the Sacred Plaza, and there's the old trail. That's the way the royal guards came with Kriya. Should we try to get to the top of the trail and wait for them?" No, I don't know," Jack said. "First, I seriously need water." "Me too," said Annie. "Look up water." "I doubt it's in here," said Jack. But he turned to the back of the book and scanned the index. "Whoa, listen to this. Machu Picchu water system," he said. He turned to a page and read aloud. Machu Picchu's water system was a famous feature of the city. The system collected rainwater, which flowed down a canal. Using the canal and rainwater, the Incas built 16 fountains with clean drinking water available for everyone. "Wow," said Annie. 16 water fountains. We just need one." Jack turned back to their book. "Look," he said, pointing at the map. "There's one near the edge of the plaza." "Great," said Annie. "Let's sneak over." "No, don't sneak. We have to act like we belong here," said Jack. "Right. Put your hat back on," said Annie. They both put their hats back on. "I think we need more than just our hats," said Jack. He looked around and saw 2 wooden shovels propped against the stone wall. "Let's borrow those." Jack and Annie each picked up a shovel. Whoa, this thing weighs a ton, said Annie. No kidding, said Jack. But we have to walk like it doesn't. Act like you carry it to the fields every day. They swung their shovels over their shoulders. Let's go, said Annie. Jack and Annie headed toward the fountain at the edge of the grassy plaza. They passed women in long red skirts holding babies. They passed kids throwing a ball the size of a basketball. Be cool, whispered Annie. Yep, said Jack, though he didn't feel at all cool. His shoulder felt like it was about to crack. His heart was pounding. They passed a forge where workers were busy hammering metal. No one seemed to be paying attention to them. When they reached the fountain, Jack was glad to see it was mostly surrounded by low stone walls. He and Annie slipped through a narrow opening. They dropped their shovels and pulled off their wool hats. Sparkling clean water streamed from the mouth of the fountain. Whew, said Annie. She cupped her hands under the stream and drank. Then she stepped aside. Jack took off his glasses. He splashed the cold water over his hot face and gulped as much as he could. He felt Annie shaking his shoulder. They're here, she whispered. Who, what? Jack said. He wiped his face with his poncho. He put on his glasses and peered through the narrow opening of the wall. Two men were walking toward the plaza. They wore helmets with feathers and carried spears. They were followed by a line of white llamas roped together. The parade of llamas made no sound, except for the tapping of their hooves on the stone pathway and the ringing of a small bell. Hear that? A bell, said Annie. Look! She pointed to the end of the line. The smallest llama had silver fur and wore a collar with a bell. Kriya, whispered Annie.